Do you prefer email or?
Email.
Okay.
I don't know if Mike has
Busy, constantly busy. This is the fourth.
mainly the email address is better.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is once I figure out the name,
Funding for
they have a website too.
Okay.
Website.
No, I'm not.
See
I'm not in.
what
We
they
like to
got.
get out on the road and travel, look for stuff.
Yeah, this would be great.
your scones.
We miss her. Tell her I said hi. She probably doesn't miss me.
He's on that board too, and he lives on San Marcos.
Let's see, where was that?
I know who he is. He was at this meeting.
Yeah, when I talked to him, he mentioned I heard,
He has a lot of opinions about things that we're trying to bring up that don't really have anything to do with it.
yeah, when he was talking to me about the fault zone and some of that stuff.
There's no fault.
Basically,
What's happening? So, what's happening is, here is the San Marcos River. And here's the San Marcos River. Highway 80 comes this way, goes to where, let's say, we'll want to talk about Thursday, but let's say Fentress is right here. And somewhere up here, I don't know exactly where it starts and there's a watershed, you know, but the creek gathers and it's an goes into the San Marcos River. And Fentress is well. They may even be close to so that creek joins the San Marcos River right there. It's an intermittent creek, so you know EC2 is that pretty bad quality and but the reason it's intermittent is earlier they are there's a lot of flow and it collects water and it's flowing like gangbusters along here.
Yeah.
But somewhere in this area, it gets into the ground and it's dry. Well, this whole area, because the river, every 1,000
Well, no, they have a water line
around
land,
the flat
but they have a permit from the district. No, they have the water. Their current, I don't know, their current leases that they have now for Carrizo and Queensville.
I was thinking water system.
Right.
I'll make that
We might want to double check the paper, but I know that.
They're in debt, they spend a lot of money, but to get all this done, they have an engineer, and everything, they were okay. Now, here comes Jerry Bill that wants to discharge into this creek, and it's gonna drop straight into the rock. So they want the best treatment, and the ECQ is referring to M15 with no phosphorus. But we're objecting to traceability of a lot of districts because we're
Hey everybody, would you go ahead and have Maddie, supervisor, groundwater?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with
So
this.
y'all want to take a
in terms of,
seat,
like,
those of you that want
water
to
splash and
learn about groundwater planning, now.
But they're,
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Blue, and I'm with the Groundwater Department of the Texas Water Development Board. I recognize a couple of those faces from coming to Groundwater Management 13 meetings. So, my group, we interact a lot with districts, and we're very involved in the groundwater management area process and involved in the desired future condition planning, which then results in the model available groundwater. So I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about how that all plays into what y'all do here. Okay. So with any work that you do, you always have a whole collection of acronyms that really mean nothing to you unless you're involved with it. So these are the ones that are relevant to me and what I do, and some of them are relevant to what y'all do. So we'll go through these a little bit, and if there are any that don't look familiar, hopefully you can kind of understand them after this. And we'll start with GCDs, which is Groundwater Conservation Districts. Here we are in Region L. In Region L, you have 17 districts and the Edwards Aquifer Authority, of course. And these districts, they're the ones who actually manage the groundwater on the ground, underground. And they set rules to effectively manage the groundwater. And they have a bunch of different kind of roles, but I'll talk about how kind of the regional water planning plays into what they're supposed to do. So one of their requirements is to come up with management plans. And these are done every 5 years. And the Texas Water Development Board actually provides data to include in these management plans that go into consideration to goals they set and how they measure their performance. And one of those is the model available groundwater. Another is the groundwater use. And we also do kind of model runs to simulate water budget information. So that's how much water is coming into the aquifer, going out, how much is coming in through recharge. And then those last 3 items are related to regional water planning. You have the water supply projected, surface water supply projected, your projected demand, and also water supply needs and water management strategies. So all of these elements have to be included in a management plan. And then in addition to all those data components, there's required goals that need to be addressed through performance standards and management objectives within the management plan. And there are 7 of them. And each one of these goals has an objective and a standard so that districts can monitor their progress of achieving these goals. And this last one, the addressing desired future conditions, is where kind of the joint groundwater planning process comes into play in the actual district management plan. So after a district has a management plan, they can establish rules to actually implement the management plan. And they have the authority to regulate groundwater through production limitations and through well spacing, and which is that first point there. And the rules can also provide for conservation, preservation, protection, and groundwater recharge. Also can address groundwater quality. They can address subsidence issues and also to prevent waste. So these are all kind of the elements that districts have the authority to create rules to address. Now, if I'm going too fast, I know you all have a big long meeting coming up, so I'm going to try and go through this quickly, but if I'm going too fast, just stop me and ask a question.
well, my question
Sure.
is this online somewhere, this entire list?
The list of the required elements for the
Your
plan.
PowerPoint?
Oh, I can share that with y'all.
Okay.
I'll leave it with y'all, and y'all can put it on the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that then. Okay, so you have the GCDs, and then they get together in GMAs to establish GOCs, which my group, GTA, deals with. So GMAs are groundwater management areas. Here you are in Region L again. You have 5 GMAs that overlap in your area. 9, a little bit of 7, 10, 13, and 15. And 13 obviously takes up kind of most of the area, although GMA 15 is pretty big as well. And so this is how the blue outline there is Region L, and then the black grayish lines, thicker lines are the GMAs. So each district is within a GMA, and some districts are in multiple GMAs, and they have kind of different planning processes. But essentially, these districts get together, and they're required to meet once a year, and they discuss their management plans, any kind of issues that might be happening within their district, kind of monitoring the progress that they're basically their groundwater monitoring. They kind of just update everyone on what's going on in their district. And then every 5 years, they're required to establish desired future conditions, or DFCs. And this is really a broad policy goal. It's basically how you want the aquifer to look in the future, some specified time period in the future. And these are quantitative descriptions, and ultimately they are used to determine groundwater availability. Typically, we see these as drawdown within an aquifer, kind of averaged over an entire area. We see some as spring flow, also storage volume, so like 50% of the aquifer remaining after 50 years. And these are only required for relevant aquifers, and this is what comes out of the statute. If a management area determines that a particular portion of an aquifer might not be particularly suited to long-term groundwater planning, they can say that it's not relevant and they don't have any model available groundwater for it or desired future conditions, and they don't need to monitor to see how they're achieving those. So it's just for relevant aquifers. And these can be divvied up by full aquifers, portions of aquifers, kind of a region, like a boundary region that's not a physical boundary necessarily, geographic area. Or it can be broken up by the different formations within an aquifer. So it's really whatever the GMA decides is suitable for their area. And then, that's the policy side of the GMAs kind of deciding what they want their aquifer to look like. And then it comes over to the Water Development Board, and we use models to come up with the modeled available groundwater. So we calculate this, and it's essentially groundwater availability values that ultimately go into the state water plan. And this value here is the amount of water that can be pumped out of the aquifer to achieve the desired future condition. So essentially you have the policy being made in the GMAs, you have the science being done through the models. If there's not a model for the particular aquifer, we'll use different hydrogeologic methods to come up with groundwater availability. So I thought that it might be useful for y'all to see the timeline for this joint groundwater planning process to see how it kind of fits into how regional water planning actually functions. And this might be a little bit hard to see, but the first step is that GMAs have to propose to adopt their desired future conditions. And this essentially is, they have to do that by May 2021 for this round of planning. And so essentially what they do in this case is they consider 9 factors. It includes how the aquifer is used, what the current hydrogeologic conditions are. They consider the state water plan, environmental impacts that may happen, subsidence, socioeconomic issues, property rights, any other information that they might need to, that's relevant for their area. And another requirement is that the DFCs have to do a balancing act between the highest level of groundwater production that they can possibly get, while also balancing that whole slew of items listed in the green box. So after the DFCs are proposed for adoption, there's a 90-day public comment period, and each district has a public hearing. So the GMA establishes or proposes the DFC, then it goes out to each district, and then they have their public hearing and collect comments. And then they actually adopt the desired future conditions in 2022. And then after they do that, they submit a whole report and any kind of modeling work that might have gone into determining those desired future conditions. And they submit that explanatory report to the Water Development Board, and we do kind of an administrative review on that report to make sure it has all the required elements that are required by statute. And then these are the items that are required to be included. And during this time period, we also kind of review the technical information that was included before we actually make the administrative completeness determination, so that we can make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row before we actually do the modeled available groundwater calculation. And so they'll submit the report, we'll determine if it's administrative complete. If it's not, we work with the GMA to get all the information that we need. And then after we do our admin review, we'll let the GMA know, and then the districts take those desired future conditions and adopt them within their district. And then we have about 6 months to calculate the MAGs and distribute them. So after we do the MAGs, they go to the GCDs, and then GCDs will use it in their management plans, and they will also consider it in their permitting process. So after this happens, they'll do their management plan, and then maybe change their rules, and they have 2 years to update their management plan to include new DFC and MAG information. And so one of the requirements for a district is to actually monitor their progress with how they're doing with the desired future conditions. And so they have all these items that they consider while they're kind of doing their permitting, doing their monitoring, to make sure that they're actually achieving desired future conditions. So they'll look at modeled available groundwater, exempt use, so certain types of groundwater use are actually exempt from permitting. They'll look at how much is permitted versus how much is actually being produced, and anything that might be happening in terms of the climate, precipitation, and production. And then also, we send the model available groundwater to you guys. And these values here go into your initially prepared plans and regional water plans, and then ultimately into the state water plan. And if you're ever curious about what kind of we produce and what we get from the GMAs in this process, we have it all posted on our groundwater website. And I picked GMA 13 to show here because they are having a meeting tomorrow. So you're welcome to come and hear what they do at groundwater management area meetings. And so now we get into kind of the regional water planning side of things. So the current round of joint planning, which would be the 2022 round of joint groundwater planning, that will feed into the 2027 state water plan. So what is going into the 2022 state water plan is from the round that just got completed for groundwater planning. So that would be the 2016 round of groundwater planning. And so during that, after all those MAGs were done, and we wrapped that up last year completely, we work with the planning group at the Water Development Board, my team does, to kind of make sure that everything that was done in the groundwater management areas actually makes it into the state water plan and the planning database. And so we have, anytime there are new requests for different sources or maybe a change in source, that comes through our groundwater department, and we kind of check things out, make sure it aligns with what the GMA does or makes sense technically, and then we'll say, okay, or maybe want to look at that again. And so that's kind of something new that we've started doing, because before groundwater was kind of separated from that whole planning process. And that's in terms of the board work, how we work internally. And then this round also, we took a look at the IPP technical memos, and particularly we were looking at non-MAG sources. So if you remember when I was talking about the relevant aquifers and non-relevant aquifers, those areas that GMAs might have not established a desired future condition for, those would be the non-MAG areas, which the availability for those are determined by you guys. So that's all I had. I know it was really fast. And I know there are probably some like DB as a database that I didn't go over. But that wraps up my very brief groundwater planning versus regional water planning presentation. Any questions? Yes?
So we were just having a conversation, but, so recently there was a change in the dates or the deliverables for this process, the groundwater process.
There was, and those are the dates that I was talking about here.
Okay, so you will finish, y'all will finish, the groundwater process will finish when, in order to feed the next planning cycle for what, regional water planning?
The DFCs will be established in 2022. And then it depends on how long it takes us to get the mags out. So like 2023, about those mags would then go into the 2027 water plan. I created a spreadsheet to try and track how this like all aligned, and every time I look at it, it gets confusing to me.
It's very confusing.
It is.
I mean, just to interject, I think it's a similar timeline we are here now. If you recall, when we were preparing to do existing supply analysis, we have 5 GMAs in this area. Most of them had already been settled on what their new DFCs and MAG definitions were, and we kind of set just a drop-dead date. If we get it by this date, we'll incorporate it. If not, and I think all 5 were able to get that through our own board approval by then. So it'll be a similar situation in 5 years. We'll just cross our fingers and we'll set a date, and then
So we'll know what the groundwater group decided, but we won't know if it's formally accepted
Adopted.
by TWDB
That's true.
until
Yeah.
later.
And so we could operate under that assumption too, that whatever the GMAs have adopted, we can just move forward from there. And if things change, then we have to go back and redo some work, but it's possible.
So, but you mentioned then, at some point in the process, they have to go back and decide if whatever their future conditions that they approve are actually being met. And if so, then they make a modification to,
They may make the modification in terms of how they're actually permitting or the kind of district level
Okay.
management. But then if it's something outrageous, maybe they'll get back together and say, this needs to be changed for this next round, or we need to change it now. This is our future condition, something like that. Because it doesn't have to happen, they can update things in between that 5-year time period. Any other questions?
Not a question, but just a comment. I think it's obvious that there is a lot of groundwater regional planning going on in that 5-year period. And a lot of cooperation between groundwater districts. And I think it's important for everybody to know that unlike regional planning groups here, the groundwater regional planning gets no funding from the state. This is all done with local dollars. And the regional planning groups are having tremendous benefit from groundwater districts doing their own little groundwater GMA regional planning. And it's a big deal.
It is, that's a very good point.
The explanatory report that GMA 9 did 5 years ago cost us $65,000. And that was shared between 9 districts, so that eased the burden a little bit. But some of these districts have small budgets, and it is a challenge sometimes to find a way to get all these different groundwater districts to come together and come up with the money and do the explanatory report, doing modeling runs or stuff like that. So I just want everyone to realize what benefits they're reaping from the groundwater management area planning process with only local funds. So it's a
Well, if that's the case here in this region, are there regions where people are just not ponying up the money and so you just don't have the data that you might have from a group that did this kind of work?
Well, it just depends on what funds the districts have available to do this planning. I don't think I've seen a case where a region supports the planning.
No, I don't know of anybody putting money into it except local groundwater districts.
Well, I guess that wasn't my question. The question was if the groundwater districts are not ponying up to do all of this expensive work, and the TWDB doesn't have the benefit of that work, then how do you manage in
Oh, I
those
see.
areas?
Yeah, The DFC and the explanatory report will cover the entire GMA, regardless of whether somebody puts money in or not. I'll give you two quick examples. There's some GMAs where various areas are not covered by a groundwater district. Those areas, those counties and watersheds, they get a DFC, they get a MAG through the regional planning process. In GMA 9, we've got one new district that's coming on board, and they don't have any money, none. They haven't been able to have their election yet. They'll have fee-based structure. That takes a while to set up, so we will probably have to come up with some sort of scenario where they may just get a free ride the first year or two or something like that, or the first planning cycle. We just don't know yet. But the point is, everything will be covered in the DFC and MAG process.
And there might be some areas where a district doesn't want their DFC to change, and there's been no new models available, and so they may say, we just want the same thing, so just keep it and, you know, use our money for other things.
But we're still gonna have to do an explanatory report,
Right.
regardless of whether we do any new modeling. But
Right.
we found out that we're gonna have to do some new modeling anyway. So, catch 22.
Yeah.
Money, money, money.
My question is not for your district, but to you. Are there areas where people are not doing this work that is on their back and you just don't have the information you need?
Everyone pretty much does the work for it, yeah, and they're required to do it by statute, so. But there's always space that we could use more data to develop the models and kind of essentially to update all the models is really the key piece there. All right, well, thank you for your time, and I'm gonna stick around to attend my first region meeting.
We have about 5 minutes before, 5 minutes before 9:30, so if y'all want to grab something, water, soda,
How are you doing, sir?
coffee.
On policy. Anyway, well, I guess we're see the big trees. So bad mom, right, we're taking her, she's starting school on Monday, we're taking her on Friday, we're not talking about the Wednesday after. But it's cool, she'll become a junior ranger, she'll do it. There's more to learn out in the national park. I have, and so I really got one of her, and my husband has a we rented this really neat. No, we're flying to San Jose. Okay, good. Until it's not. No, it's not very realistic when it comes to she's just turned 6. Yeah, she's used to flying with me this year. It was real lucky. Coming off of my so many miles I had. I earned it. And in
Okay, everybody, ready? Y'all want to do roll call? I don't know if it's going to be Caitlin or Hillary.
Tim Andrews,
Here.
Sean Byram, Kurt Campbell,
Here.
Pat Calhoun, Ray Chavez, Alan Cockrell,
Here.
Will Connolly, Charlie Platten, Vic Hildebrand,
Here.
Kevin Yannick,
Here.
Tom Youngman,
Here.
Russell Latham,
Here.
Glenn Lord,
Here.
Dan Meyer,
Here.
Gary Middleton,
Here.
Jonathan Stinson for Kevin Capson,
Here.
Liliana Pena, here. Robert Fuente,
Here.
Humberto Ramos,
Here.
Steve Ramsey,
Here.
Weldon Riggs,
Here.
Julia Cuyo for Roland Reese, here. Diane Savage,
Here.
Suzanne Scott, here. Greg Silverman,
Here.
Mitchell Sowers, Heather Sumter, here. Thomas Taggart,
Here.
Ian Taylor,
Here.
Diane Wasnick,
Here.
Adam Yablonsky,
Here.
McCoy Elizabeth, here, sorry. Roland Fiester, Ilian Dialagago, John McGee, Marty Kelly,
Chad Morris here from Marty Kelly.
thank you. Joseph McDaniel, Jamie Nicole, here. Carl Poole, and Rusty Ray. Thank you.
All right, looks like we have a good quorum here today. We have two people that have signed up for public comment. First, we have Alan Montemayor.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before your august group here. Also, thank you to SAWS for hosting us here. I do appreciate it. My wife and I have, since I retired, my wife and I have traveled the world. We've been in many places where you do not have the kind of water that we have here in South Texas. We have the expectation that when we turn the tap on, that clean, potable water will come out. dependably, and that is not the case in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, if water comes out at all, it may or might not be drinkable, and it may or might not have visible contaminants in it. So first, I want to thank you guys for everything that you've done in the past and everything that you will do in the future to maintain that level of water that we take for granted so easily here in San Antonio and South Texas and Region L. Region L is continuing, the population of Region L is continuing to grow, and it looks like it will continue to do so in the foreseeable future. As that happens, there will be more and more pressure put upon water supplies, as you guys are intimately involved in. We appreciate all the planning that you're doing to assure that that growth will be accommodated in an efficient fashion. But a lot of the low-hanging fruit is gone. Most of it, if not all of it, is gone. And we see SAWS reaching out 142 miles to draw water in from afar in order to at least provide the perception of abundant water here in San Antonio. Well, this is the California model. And that California model has downsides associated with it that I don't think I really have to tell you guys about. Everyone here is a professional. But I exhort you not to follow that California model, to learn from what's happened in California. We are at the very early stages of water wars in South Texas as supplies become more and more limited. So what I'm really exhorting you guys to do is to look at sustainability. We're very aware that if you look at sustainable water supplies, that does not necessarily include things like conservation. Okay? However, and we're very aware that if you look at conservation through the lens of strictly dollars and cents, that doesn't necessarily make sense for everyone. Okay? However, conservation is sustainable. If we can move people to do more rainwater capture, to do more stormwater retention and reuse, to do more gray water systems, as SAWS has already done here in San Antonio. If we can do those things and begin to do them in a big way, we can forestall the issues that are coming up that are going to push us to decisions like California has made. So really what I'm asking you guys to do, and I'm going to be brief because I know you have a lot of ground to cover, what I'm asking you guys to do is to continue your efforts at sustainability, at water reuse, etc., at right sizing of water, not just considering water as one size fits all. Look at rainwater harvesting, look at stormwater retention and reuse, look at gray water, look at condensate, and please don't do so just through the lens of cost. Look at it through the lens of what is good for the sustainability of the region, what is good for the poorest among us who can ill afford increasing water costs, etc. And I thank you for your kind attention today.
Thank you, sir. Rachel, what is she? There she is. Rachel Solinski.
Good morning, Chairwoman Scott and Regional members. I've appeared a few times over the last few years and commented about the difficulty of being a member of the public trying to get information about your meetings. And I've gotten various responses each time, and I want to commend you for the fact that now when you go to the Regional homepage, it says right there, after you've posted your notice of meeting, that when the meeting is, it also has a purpose. I find that a vast improvement because if people get to your homepage, they no longer have to go through this maze of trying to figure out when the meeting is, or if there is a meeting, or what is it about. So thank you for doing that. And I'd also like to commend you for your work and your civil discourse. I would hope that it would go without saying that in all public meetings we would have civil discourse, but it's become so evident increasingly in our society that that's not always the case. And I've always been very impressed by the dedication and the seriousness with which all the members of this committee address their task, because this is arguably the most important task. Without water, we don't last but a few days. And so this is the very serious task that you all are here to deal with. And I thank you for your service and the way that you work with each other to accomplish that for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the only two that I have signed up at this time for public comment. Next is the approval of the minutes from the May 2nd meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes? Ileana? Okay. Tim, okay. Tim and Weldon second. Ileana moved. And we have 2 seconds. Tim and Weldon.
Susan, just one comment on the minutes. For Control Soward's last meeting, we had Andrew Young sit in, and we need to amend that on here, so just so you know, that will be fixed.
Oh, okay, thank you. So that would be then a motion. Ileana, will you accept a change to the motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Yes.
Okay. Or corrected, I guess we should say. Sorry, as corrected. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. The minutes are approved. Next, Scott Skorman, is he here? There you go. Would you like to give your update on the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan?
Good morning, Regional. Appreciate the opportunity to come back and just give you an update on what we've been doing.
Is that microphone on? I'm sorry. Anybody else having trouble?
Is that better?
Perfect.
Yeah, there's a button, I should know that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning, Regional. I appreciate the opportunity to be back here and give you comment on where things stand with the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan. You might remember from my last presentation during your May meeting that we were in a cycle of about to consider two major items. One being our phase 2 proposal, which was a work plan and a resolution, kind of laying out what we will be doing for the next 8 years from 2020 through 2028. That at our May 23rd meeting, I'm pleased to announce that that our implementing committee, as well as our stakeholder committees, the implementing committee, which is effectively our board of directors, is they passed and approved the phase 2 work plan, as well as the resolution that was attached. That effectively puts a capstone on phase 1, which we have a 15-year incidental take permit from 2013 through 2019 or 2020. Is phase 1, and phase 1 was a developmental piece. It was very important, but now we're moving into a spot where a lot of the research and a lot of the heavy lifting has been done, and we'll now go into maintenance mode, trying to make sure that we maintain what has been established, as well as complete additional research and additional policy work that needs to be completed in the 20 through 2028 phase, which is phase 2. Phase 2 is very important, and we laid out what we want to do and how we want to do it in our work plan. So I just wanted to let you know that did pass, and that was a very significant event for the EAA and for the EAHCP. And secondly, I'd like to let you know that I mentioned last time that the VISPO program, which we oversee, the Voluntary Irrigation Suspension Program option, VISPO, was approved, that the cap from 40,000 acre feet, which we have been using for our market engagement, and is part of the EHCP, or the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan itself, that's laid out specifically at 40,000 acre feet, was approved to be lifted to 41,795 acre feet. That increase will allow us to create certainty around the spring flow in the Comal Springs. We will be able to comfortably say that we now have modeled it with that number to reach the 30 CFS, which is the minimum required flows in the Comal Springs system. So I think that's another major accomplishment that the HCP and the implementing committee, as well as the stakeholder committee, have accomplished in their efforts over the past 12 months. And this work has been laid out by my predecessor, Nathan Pence, as well. This is not something we accomplished in a vacuum. This is part of a process that's been going on for numbers of years. And so I would like to just let you know those two things. I'll be back at the next meeting and I'll give you updates on where we are. At this stage, we're going to be moving into a busy fall, as most of us will be. The summer was a lull, but now we'll be moving into a busy fall, and I'll come back and brief you on what we've done at that stage. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions for Scott? All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And the next item is a quick update on the activities of the Bay and Basin Area Stakeholder Committee. You have an update in your packet under this item that just, we got an update from the state kind of on the progress of all the various studies. So you will see here that many of the studies that were approved are still in progress. There's a table, a chart of when the cost associated with the studies as well as the delivery dates that are anticipated. Some of the studies are going through sort of a review process right now. We have asked some folks, I know the state Water Development Board, TCQ has asked for some input or review of some of these studies, so those are ongoing right now. The other item that I wanted to bring to your attention is we do have some vacancies on the BBASC, and we are soliciting nominees to fill 5 vacancies, and those are in the areas of chemical, manufacturing, commercial fishermen, municipalities, recreational water use, and industry refining, and that those nominations are due August the 30th. So if you yourself or anyone that you know would be interested potentially in nominating themselves, or if you want to nominate someone, you can do that. There is a nomination form actually in the packet under the next item, because we're going to have to talk about filling our own vacancy from Regional. But we encourage you to submit those nominations so we can fill those vacancies. We have received some so far, which is good, but obviously if there's other people that are interested, please let us know and submit those nominations. Any other, there also, it's noted here in the packet information that there are these direct solicitation for nominees. One of them will be ours, and we'll talk about that in the next agenda item, but we're also going to the Soil and Water Conservation District for that as well. For their nomination. Any questions about that update? All right. So the next item is, in fact, we need to nominate someone from to the BBASC to represent Regional. Con Mims was serving in that capacity for a long time as he was chair of Regional. So now we need a new representative. I can't serve as he did as chair because I'm already on that representing river authorities. So we do need someone else that would be interested in serving as our Regional representative on the BBASC. Is there anyone that would be interested in that position?
Suzanne, I would be interested if that's appropriate. Yeah, so.
Okay. Can we take action on this today?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I move to nominate Ileana Pena for that position.
second, okay, Glenn seconded. All right, any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of approving Ileana's nomination to serve as the Regional representative on the BBASC, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And what we'll do, Ileana, is we'll get together with you, Hillary and Caitlin. We'll kind of get you briefed on the process and where we are.
Do you still need this filled out?
I do think they probably want the nomination form filled out, just so that we can make it official. And we'll note that we've adopted that here by action at Regional. Thank you so much for volunteering to do that. Okay, next, Elizabeth is going to make a presentation from the Water Development Board on some updates. She's got a lot to tell us.
So a few quick updates first. Since the May meeting, the Water Development Board has approved Regional's notice to proceed request for Block 2 and Block 3 water management strategies. So that allocates all of the Task 5A funds in the contract. We've also approved the requested budget adjustments. We're working on the socioeconomic impact analysis reports, and we'll be having those available at the end of the year. And we're going to have staff available to give presentations on those results to interested planning groups. So that's something, if you're interested in, we can try to arrange. We've also recently launched this new planning data dashboard that visualizes the planning data that goes into the state water plans. And so I just want to show you this quickly, but we've got some information on populations projections and also historical population data. There's a tool for water use demand, and then you can kind of filter by region L, by counties, to kind of go through some of the data that you guys work with. So if you're interested in this, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's on our website. If you go to water planning, planning data, and then planning data dashboard. Okay, so the 86th legislative session is over, and I just want to provide an update on legislation that passed this session. We've got a copy of this presentation included in your meeting materials. So we're going to go over bills that passed related to regional and state water planning. That's House Bills 807, 721, and 723. I also want to provide some information on the flood financing and planning bills that passed. That's Senate Bills 7 and 8. We've had a lot of stakeholder interest in those bills as well. So we'll start with House Bill 807, which is the main planning related bill that passed this session. It requires the board to establish an interregional planning council, which will be made up of one member of each of the planning groups. And the purpose of the council is to improve interregional coordination and also facilitate discussion on regional water management strategies. And then there are also 5 new requirements that House Bill 807 adds to the regional planning process. And so this slide lists those 5 new requirements. There are already requirements within the planning documents that kind of lay the groundwork for some of these new items. For example, conducting an overall assessment of drought preparations in the planning area, and also collecting information on drought factors, triggers, and actions for water sources. So we'll go through each of these new requirements in more detail in just a second. In terms of implementation, House Bill 807 is effective immediately, and a rulemaking will be initiated this year to incorporate these new requirements into the planning rules. We anticipate that will be finalized next spring. We recently sent out an email seeking preliminary input on the rulemaking, and so the deadline to provide preliminary input is August the 19th. I think there's a letter with more information on how you can submit comments on your agenda item 13. We're working on the logistics of the Planning Council, but we're encouraging planning groups to consider nominations at upcoming meetings. And then we also sent out some guidance on the new requirements in June, and we're going to go over that in the next few slides as well. One other key item to mention is that there are no new appropriations with this legislation, so the guidance, where it can, recommends how you can address these new requirements through current data collection efforts. All right, so the next 5 slides cover the House Bill 807 requirements and the board's guidance. The first new requirement states that planning groups should identify unnecessary or counterproductive variations in specific drought response strategies, including outdoor water restrictions, among user groups in the regional planning area that may confuse the public or otherwise impede drought response efforts. So the board's guidance suggests that planning groups should review information collected through current requirements. That includes information on drought responses and triggers for water sources, and then document any drought response strategies that the planning group considers to be unnecessary or counterproductive. And that would go in chapter 7 of the plan. So what's considered unnecessary or counterproductive is left up to the planning group's discretion. The second requirement states that if a planning area has significant identified water needs, the regional water plan shall provide a specific assessment for the potential of aquifer storage and recovery projects to meet those needs. The threshold for what's a significant water need is left up to the planning group to define, but the planning group will need to include details of how they determine what this threshold of significant is in the regional plan in order to meet this requirement. If a planning group determines that water needs are significant, the planning group will then need to generally assess ASR potential to the best of its ability based on remaining budget resources currently under contract. And then if some planning groups have already assessed ASR feasibility during strategy evaluations, you would just need to document that in the plan. The third requirement states that the regional water plan shall set one or more specific goals for gallons of water use per capita per day in each decade of the period covered by the plan for municipal water user groups in the area. So GPCD goals could be specific or a range. You can assign them individually for municipal user groups, or you could group them potentially, however the planning group best sees fit to do that. And then this information should be included in subchapter 5B of the plan. The fourth requirement states that the regional water plan shall assess the progress of the planning area in encouraging cooperation between water user groups for the purpose of achieving economies of scale and otherwise incentivizing strategies that benefit the entire region. So this should be based on information collected during plan development, and it will be included in chapter 11. All right, the final House Bill 807 requirement states the planning group should make legislative recommendations for any other changes that members of the planning group believe would improve the water planning process. This is similar to existing requirements. It should be included in chapter 8 of the plan. And that's all of the House Bill 807 requirements. Brian?
I just want to point out for everyone that we have an agenda item number 13 on our agenda today to discuss these requirements and how our suggestions on how best to tackle those. So we'll get to that in a little while.
Oh boy.
If there are any questions right now, otherwise we'll keep going. Okay. So House Bill 721 is effective immediately and requires the board to do two things. The first is to conduct studies of ASR projects in the state water plan and then report those results back to the planning groups. It also requires the board to conduct a statewide survey of, to identify suitable major and minor aquifers for use for ASR projects. It's anticipated that the first feasibility study will be completed by September of 2020, and then that statewide survey report is due to state leadership in December of 2020. So these won't be available for consideration this planning cycle. House Bill 723 requires the TCEQ to update the water availability models for the Brazos, Neches, Red, and Rio Grande River basins, and that's by December of 2022. So we anticipate that these updated models will be available for the next planning cycle. Switching gears a little bit, Senate Bill 7 relates to flood funding. It's aimed at providing funding through multiple funds and accounts for flood planning, protection, mitigation, data collection and modeling, and then also Hurricane Harvey projects. Senate Bill 8 establishes the flood planning process, and it's administered by the Water Development Board. Flood planning regions will be based on river basins, The first regional flood plans are due January 2023. The state flood plan is due in September of 2024. So right now, it looks like these will be modeled after the regional planning, state water planning process, but it'll be separate regions, group members, and water development board support staff. So we're going to be using the Water Development Board's stakeholder email list to send out notifications on upcoming stakeholder meetings, rulemaking, and other information on the flood planning and financing implementation. So we're also going to be holding stakeholder meetings around the state the first 2 weeks in August. And we've got meeting information on those available on our website on the homepage. But it looks like on August the 6th, there's going to be a meeting in Bastrop. And then on August the 13th, there'll be one in Kerrville. And so I think those are the ones that are closest to you. You can sign up for our email list at the website link provided. If you have any specific flood-related questions, you can email flood@twdb.texas.gov. And that's about all the information that we have available right now. Staff are working on developing additional details, so keep an eye out on our website or sign up for the email list if you want more information.
And just to add to that, there at the same website, they have a document that is, it looks like this, that is sort of some questions that they're asking for people to look at. This will be part of the conversation that they'll have at these various meetings that are being held throughout the state. And they're asking for feedback, written comments regarding this rule. This is sort of pre to rulemaking, if you will. They're trying to get feedback before they do the rulemaking as it relates to this flood planning process. And according to the letter that accompanied this, they want written feedback is requested by August the 30th, 2019. If you're unable to go to the meetings, you can still provide input. If you look at this document, it's very thorough. They've come up with a lot of questions based on various meetings that they've had in advance of this. And you can provide feedback as they put together the rulemaking. So,
Suzanne, I'm really interested in this because, as you know, San Marcos has been hit by so many big floods in recent years, and we think it's going to get worse with climate change. And the first meeting, I just want to tell everybody, is the only one that's anywhere near Austin.
Yeah.
And it's in Bastrop next Tuesday, the 6th, at 9:30 in the morning at the LCRA facility there. 1405 Willow Street. After that, the meetings are more, I think there's one in Kerrville, and they're pretty far from here. So I just want to warn y'all. You can always do written comments, but I think it's real important for us to pay attention. If this flood plan is going to be, if planning for floods is really something that your community wants to do, you need to be involved.
yes, and I sort of echo those remarks. This is a very important process that the state is really trying to address these flooding issues on a statewide basis, and obviously they are looking to the successes of what we've done with regional water planning to try to bring together stakeholder groups and trying to figure out how the state can start to invest funding toward priority projects that would address flooding going forward. And they really are trying to look at everything, not only the structural, but also non-structural. There's many communities that haven't even been able to update maps and models and that sort of thing. Very important that there would be opportunities for us to have more of a standard by which the entire state looks at flooding and flood planning. Being able to encourage people throughout the state to know their risk is very, very important. And many people, we're fortunate in urban areas, we know our risk because we have updated flood maps and models and things like that, but there are many communities throughout the state that do not. And if you don't know your risk, then you don't know what you need to do to address that. So this is very important. We encourage everyone to participate. So thank y'all. And again, go online and get this document if you want to provide your written comments if you can't go to the meetings.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so the next item, she had mentioned that one of the elements of that was passed by the legislature is the nomination of a Regional representative for the Interregional Planning Council, which is a committee that's going to be put together that's trying to address these issues of interregional collaboration. So we need a nominee for that. I would offer myself for that if y'all would be willing to have me serve in that capacity, but I am open to anyone that would like to be nominated to serve in that role.
Can you nominate yourself? If not, I will.
Okay, yeah. All right.
A second.
Okay. Thank you. So Robert is nominating me to serve as our representative on the Interregional Council, and Gary seconded. Any other nominations?
I move nomination cease to be elected.
Oh.
By
All right.
acclamation.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank y'all very much. I will keep y'all informed of what happens in that process. Thank you so much. Okay, next is my chair's report. So really, we have so much on the agenda. All I wanted to bring up here, and I think it's in the packet.
The future meetings.
The future meetings
Yeah,
is.
it's listed in the packet.
Yes, thank you. So, as you know, we're getting to the kind of bitter end, so to speak, of putting together this, yes, bittersweet end, of putting together this planning, our plan, our initially prepared plan. It's surprising that this is moving so fast towards the end, but we wanted to make you aware that obviously we have our normal meeting in November that's coming up, but and we'll learn from our consultant's report here that there's many things that we're going to have to do as we get to the end of this process. I believe the plan is due in March
3rd.
March 3rd. So we've held on the calendar here at SAWS, thank you, Stephen, very much. Thursday, January the 23rd, and Thursday, February the 20th to have additional meetings. So that would kind of straddle, I guess, what would have been our normal February meeting. We just feel like this is going to be important for us during the process, and obviously, if you would like to add comment to that.
Yeah, we're not looking to add additional meetings, we're
No.
restructuring
Right.
the meeting dates in 2020 so that we can get 2 meetings in before the ITP is due. And that will give us a chance to get through all the water management strategies in November and most of the chapters through November, and then come back in January to discuss the plan as a whole, so that then we could do the cumulative analysis and present that in February and get kind of the blessing at that point. So this gives us just an extra time to break up all that work and gives us time to do the analysis of the Chapter 6, the cumulative effects of the plan and how it relates to natural resources in the region. It gives us a month to do that work and present that to you. So that's kind of the thinking behind this, and I'd appreciate.
So does that mean the early February normal meeting date is canceled?
Yes, that's
Yes.
We're effectively taking the February meeting, shift into January, and the May meeting
Okay.
and moving to February.
Are we getting rid of the May meeting?
At this point,
Okay. All right.
And the thought behind that is that's about the time we would be holding any public
Exactly.
meetings regarding the initially prepared plan. And we typically, the planning group typically takes action on the meetings for the coming year at the November meeting. So this is informational, get your thoughts, if you have any comments, be sure to let the chair know. And then we'll put it for action at the November meeting.
Yes, this is just sort of giving you notice now. If you have to check your calendars, it's important that we get all of that done at the very end. And I do think this is really in line with sort of the guiding principles that we sort of brought forward as we started this planning process. We wanted to have sufficient time. I mean, as we're looking at all these management strategies in November, you're going to want to have time to digest all of that, bring it back, be able to look at it and have more time to understand how all of the planning elements fit together. And I think this schedule will allow for you to do that. And that was important in the guiding principles. So just look at your schedule and make sure that these dates will work for you.
No vacation.
No rest for the weary, but we do, I think Stephen has made sure that this room is available on the dates that are there. So we should be good. All right, thank you. All right, next item is moving into the consultant's working schedule.
Thank you. Thanks. I have a couple items here, like 3 of us, so give me a minute. First one just is our schedule. Just to want to show that, and keep you guys abreast of where we are and where we're headed. This is just an update of our schedule. As you see, our timeline keeps getting compressed every meeting by 3 months or so. We are currently heavy in the evaluation and potential water management strategies and trying to present those to you. Obviously, a big portion of this meeting is going to be talking about water management strategies that we're evaluating, as will November be as well. This is that time frame I talked about, starting to look at the cumulative effects later in this period here, January, February. So these are the public hearings in April, May timeframe that Mr. Robbins described. Down here, we have officially set the date for this meeting, obviously in August and November. And then the gray here is the suggestion that we just discussed, having 2 meetings before the IDP is due March 3rd next year, with the planning group, with the regional water plan due in October of 2020. So, yes, any questions on schedule or anything there? Just want to present that information. Okay. So, I want to point out, the second thing on here, I want to point out that there's a list of updated projects for your consultant team that are working in the region at your desk there. Just lists the various projects we're doing in addition to regional planning in the regional area. Some of the new items there are related to GBRA's Lake Dunlap school game down here and some water supply issues. So we'll be very open about that we're helping to assist them with those fixes and whatnot. And then we've updated our sub-consultants as well. Menez Associates, Daniel B. Stevens, and SWCA projects. And if you have any questions about them, we have representatives from all 4 companies here today. So feel free to grab us after the meeting and ask if you have questions specifically. So, and then final item on here. At a meeting sometime last year, and I'm not exactly which one, we talked about major water providers, and we came up with a definition of major water providers. During that time, we defined major water providers as all of our wholesale water providers, of which there are 6, plus any water user group with a with a demand greater than 20,000 acre-feet by the year 2070. At the time, and I believe what was the case, the intent was that was going to be municipal water user groups with a need of 20,000 acre-feet or more by 2070. We did not make it clear we were talking specifically about municipalities only and not other non-municipal categories. And we certainly have some non-municipal categories that have demands greater than 20,000 acre-feet by 2070. Those are all on a countywide basis, and it makes it very difficult to talk about them as major water providers. And so I wanted to get clarification from this group that the action you took was indeed intended to be municipal water user groups only and not just any water user group. Does anyone have any objection to that? Okay. We'll move forward with that and such. That clears up that, and just like I said, it's clarification on the motion you guys took back last year. So.
Do you need us to take action to clarify that, or is it?
I think it's just a clarification.
So everyone understands the clarification is our water user groups.
It's wholesale. Our major water providers are wholesale water providers plus municipal water user groups with a demand of greater than 20,000 acre-feet by 2070.
So if
Is that what you have here on these slides?
Yes, I put this in the slides coming up.
Can you pull that up just to make sure that everyone understands? I think that's what you're, that's.
Is it 8 of?
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1, thank you.
Chapter 1,
Couldn't remember which.
I think that's where I see it.
So, yeah, here's the major water provider. As part of chapter, because in chapter 1 we have to define what our major water providers are, that's why this came up.
Right.
We started looking at the data and it was like, we have irrigation as a county-wide with demands greater than 20,000. I don't think that's what the planning group meant. So
So this is the list that would
This-
fall into the category, the
That's correct.
clarification category that you're asking for.
that's correct. And when I presented this last year, we presented this list as the list.
Yes.
And so I wanted to make sure that while we didn't say municipal specifically, I think what was intended was municipal.
Does that help?
To me, if it's a provider, I don't know. Irrigation, if there were an entity that had that much irrigation water, would they be a provider to a lot of different?
That's not the way, I mean, that's typically not the way irrigation is
That's what I-
calculated here. So I mean, we had this discussion during step work or two, a provider, but really, in the board sense, we can define it as anything you want. And while the word provider is there, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a provider. I just wanted to, so I want to make sure we got this clarification out there.
Okay. Everyone good? So by consensus, we're agreeing that this definition is what we'll be using. Okay? All right, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate that, guys. So that's all I have on agenda item number 11. Oh no, I take it back. I'm gonna go back to the schedule real quick. I kind of glossed over this and I didn't mean to. So, talking about it under item 10 and number 11 here, just in terms of looking forward, or, you know, you have the agenda here for this meeting. The next meeting in November will be very similar. We have planned to talk about a large number of water management strategies, as you'll see here in a moment. Some of those are more your traditional water management strategies with infrastructure and everything. Others are kind of catch-all ones, and we'll show that list later. We'll also be presenting chapters 3, 4, and 7, and I imagine that the chapter 8 committee that's dealing with policy and stuff will probably want to present chapter 8 as well. So there's a great deal of information that will be presented in the November meeting. I wanted to keep everyone aware of what we plan to present at that meeting. So, okay, that's all I have for item 11.
So now we move on to item number 12.
Number 12, yeah, so for today, we are going to present chapters 1 and 2, kind of just in summary form. From a logistics standpoint, before I delve into this, we are in the process of completing these write-ups for chapters 1 and 2. They're separate documents. And once we have completed those, we're going to plan to put those on the Regional website, and San Antonio River Authority has sent out a notice for those who are interested to go take a look at those and read through them and give us any comments. We haven't completely worked out the logistics, but I believe what we'll probably do is we'll probably put a time window on that of 2 to 3 weeks to review that. And we'll ask for comments sent back via email, both to the San Antonio River Authority and then CC Black and Beach on those. And we can consider those comments and see how we can integrate those. So, and for all the chapters that we're developing between now and the IPP, we'll be kind of taking that process. So after the November meeting, we'll try to do that as well. My intent is to try to get chapters 1 and 2 up as soon as possible after today. I would like to do it by the end of next week, but it'll be sometime in August for sure. In a similar fashion, when we get to water management strategies, the process there is that we are developing the information for the water management strategies, including description, the availability analysis, the cost, the environmental, the implementation issues. That also becomes an individual kind of write-up, work document write-up. We are sending those to project sponsors, and they're reviewing those. Once we get comments back from them, and we integrate those and make any necessary changes, our plan is to put those on the website as well. In a similar fashion, we'll try to not bombard you with notifications. We'll do a bunch of if we can. So look for those, probably, especially the ones from the May presentations and August presentations. Look for those kind of in the coming month or so. Any questions about that process? This
We'll
just
make
gives
sure
everyone a
that we
chance to
send you reminders from our River Authority staff, as we send these out, we'll continue to remind you before the deadline, so don't get upset when you get a lot of emails from us. We just want to make sure, because you've got a lot on your plate, everybody does, but we want to make sure that you're reminded about going out and looking at these particular documents so that you have plenty of time to provide your comments.
And in doing so, this allows us to, when we get to that January and February meetings of next year, to kind of approve that plan, that draft plan, kind of in expeditious fashion. So everyone's had a chance to review all the information, hopefully, and has given comment back. We've tried to incorporate those as we can. So we appreciate your help on that. Okay, so chapters 1 and 2 today. We're just going to present information on this. Again, write-up's coming, hopefully, within a week or so to the website. So chapter 1, for those of you who are new to the planning process, is really just, it's called a description of the planning area, and it really encompasses a lot of information. Just kind of giving a general description of what makes Region L unique, as opposed to the other 15 regions around the state. It talks about various pieces of information, everything from our water providers and whatnot and water user groups to the natural resources of the area, and the land and whatnot. It also talks about the economic features of the area as well, what's prominent cities, etc. So one of the things we talk about is wholesale water providers. We've had this discussion. The definition there is listed here. What a wholesale water provider is, and then this work group went through a process of defining what those wholesale water providers are, of which we have 6, including San Antonio Water System, Guadalupe-Blanco River Authority, Canyon Regional Water Authority, Cibolo Valley Local Government Corporation, Alliance Regional Water Authority, and Church Seguin. Not Church Seguin Local Government Corporation. So let me fix that. Similar fashion we just discussed, we had this planning group had the opportunity to define what major water providers are, and we just got a clarification on that, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but that was our definition. It's now clarified, and these are our entities. So it's essentially our wholesale water providers plus the cities of Victoria, St. Marcos, and New Braunfels. This chapter also talks about historical population and area and density information. So we've summarized that information here by county, looking at the 2010 population, the area of each of the counties, and the population density for that county, as you can see, and then the total down here at the bottom. Obviously, Bear County is probably the largest county in terms of population and the population density. But we have a wide range here, and you can see some of the curriculum, or you can see some of the hybrid areas are included here, including Comal County and Gates County as well, the I-35 corridor. So we also, again, talk about the historical population growth through the decades, going back to the 1960s, and then percentage growth amongst those all the way through the 2010 census. This is all based on census information. Obviously, we're getting ready to kick off another census next year. We will not have the information in time for this plan, but in the 2026 plan, the 2020 census information will be included. So that will just add to this graphic later, the next planning cycle. Age, we include some age demographics in here. Also, according to the 2010 census, this is just kind of some interesting information here for kind of the age distribution of the population around the region. We talk about ecoregions. Ecoregions is from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We have 5 that cover this area, so you're very familiar with this: Edwards Plateau, the Texas Rockland Prairies, etc., all the way down to the Western Gulf Coast Plain. So this information is presented as well. We talk about economic activity in terms of the different types of economics that occur within the region and how they're distributed as a percentage. We talk about the major aquifers. Most of you know this. We have 4 major aquifer groups here, including the Edwards, Trinity, Carrizo, Wilcox, and Gulf Coast Aquifer. We talk about the minor aquifers here as well, that are defined by Texas Water on Board as well. talk about our river basins and our reservoirs that we cover. And yes, we do touch all the way down the Rio Grande, believe it or not. And that's all I have. So that's kind of the summary type of information you can find in chapter 1, along with some other information as well. Are there any questions or comments on chapter 1? In large part, it's a carryover from the 2016 plan. We're just updating information where appropriate. Okay.
Well, I will say, it's really wonderful to see that the working age of our population is almost a full half of our population, so that's good. There will be plenty of people to keep paying into Social Security.
I feel like that's a selfish comment.
But there's
Shared by
also
all.
a large young group coming
Yes,
along to
that's
take
true.
care of y'all, so don't worry.
That's great.
Assuming they'll actually be working.
That's for me to worry. All right, so chapter 2 really encompasses our population and water demand projections. So while we talked about population trends in chapter 1, chapter 2 is the summary of information talking about how the Water and Board went about projecting forward population and municipal water demands, but also non-municipal demands as well moving forward through our planning decade, or planning horizon, sorry. So that's the decades of 2020 through 2070. And really what we're doing is trying to capture that information in summary form here. Obviously, for each individual entity, we've done the work, and we have water demand and population projections for each of those water user groups on the entity level. But this is really kind of summary information. So you see kind of big tables like this, looking at, again, 2020 decade through 2070, where our population is projected to be next year, and where it's going to be in 50 years from next year. So again, you can see the growth happening a lot in the I-35 corridor, Bear, Comal, Hayes counties. I don't want to forget Guadalupe County and Gonzales County as well. Those are certainly growing too. Victoria, obviously growing as well. So information there, tables we discussed, and then just from a graphical standpoint. Yes.
Question about that, the back one.
Mr. Taggart.
In chapter 1, where we had Hayes County shown, it was shown as partial with a population of 125,000, which is only the regional.
Right, that's correct.
But it appears in chapter 2, we're using the entire county population. I mean, should we keep that consistent in our region? Well, they're showing 2020 at 183. So I guess I'm just asking you a question about those numbers. I don't know whether they're the same time frame, but I would assume they would be. You show Hayes as partial there at the top of the right. 2010, yeah, that's the difference.
That's
Should we annotate chapter 2 to show partial?
this should be the partial, actually. This is the partial.
Should we annotate it?
We will, yeah, we will mention that. Yeah. It is only half for the county, essentially. Because the other half county resides in Region K. So, but the numbers shown are half. So. Thank you for pointing out. So again, looking at the population projections now